sports
These are
really
others' words about you.
We have purpose. We have a why. We bring people together. We connect.
I feel like God is our greatest supporter and our greatest coach.
This is Rabbi Andrea Sherman from Sinai Temple in Los Angeles, and welcome to Rabbi on the Sidelines, the show where we discuss the intersection of sports and faith. This week, we are joined by a legend, a true treat for Rabbi on the Sidelines. The list of accomplishments is too long to read, but we're going to just hit a couple. Emmy Award winner, Thursday Night Football on Amazon broadcaster, Pete Rozelle Television Radio Award winner, Pro Football Hall of Fame inductee, correspondent with HBO's Real Sports with Bryant Gumbel. Covered 25 Super Bowls, NBA Finals, Major League All-Star Games, NCAA tournaments, Stanley Cup Finals, the Olympics, and that's just to name a few. We are so thrilled to be joined by Andrea Kremer. Andrea, thanks for joining us on Rabbi on the Sidelines.
Hello, Rabbi. How are you?
I am great, and we cannot begin without a shout-out to Pam Weisberg, Sinai Temple member and just a wonderful friend of our community, and I know of yours as well. So, Pam, thank you.
Long-time friend, just someone that I have the most professional admiration for and the greatest personal affection for. So, yes. Pam is a dear friend, and I'm glad that she connected us. But now I just want to warn you, I have been known to hijack interviews. I promise you I won't do that. But I do have to ask one thing.
Of course.
What the heck are you doing on the sidelines? Why are you doing this? Why do you feel passionate about this?
I love it. So now I'm being interviewed by Andrea Kremer. This is great. So we'll talk about that because faith in sports is something that I believe as a rabbi has to come together. I actually asked Tom Rinaldi a couple of weeks ago of Catholic faith. I said, Tom, should I be doing this? And it actually started in 2020, the beginning of the pandemic, when we needed Zoom programming for our synagogue. And the passion that I brought with sports, I grew up in Syracuse, New York. The Syracuse Orange, football, basketball, those are our Lakers growing up. No synagogue programming happened when there was a Georgetown Syracuse game. It was absolutely not going to happen. And my dad was the rabbi.
Even God has his priorities in line, right?
That's true. But the synagogue gathered there. And I realized that it was really a sacred space within the Carrier Dome. Now, no longer the Carrier Dome, the JMA Dome, but that's another topic. And what I realized is I started talking to people in the sports world, both broadcasters and athletes, and it was all relationship based. It started with my Syracuse connections. During rabbinical school, Coach Jim Boeheim basketball camp, refereeing there got me through rabbinical school. A couple of dollars, but also a passion. And I realized that wherever I took my rabbinic journey, I wanted to also have sports within that. And when I got here to Sinai Temple, I was able to start a basketball camp, competing with the best basketball camps in Los Angeles. But the kids wanted to come here because they felt that a safe space and also a space that they can, I said, high-level sports and high-level values. And so in our basketball camp, we do a social action project every day. We have a Shabbat dinner as an award ceremony. We're doing things off the court. And that's why speaking to people like you, hearing what you're doing off the court, off the camera is as or even more inspiring than what I see on the camera as well. So that's just the genesis.
Yeah, no, I appreciate you sharing that. I think it's absolutely fascinating because I'll be totally honest with you. And I don't know if any of your other broadcast people have talked about this. And if they haven't, then they're not telling you the full truth. And that is that in the television world, there is a very delicate balance that you have to draw with religion. One of the, you don't even know this. And I tried to find this for you to send this to you before the interview. And I couldn't yet. And it used to be posted on YouTube and it evaporated, however, whatever the word is in cyberspace. But I still do want to find it for you. It's one of the greatest stories I've ever done. It was back when I was at ESPN and it was completely religion based. And I could tell you about it later if you're interested. But the point that I'm bringing it up for is that when the story literally came to me, I said to my coordinating producer on Sunday NFL Countdown for ESPN, I said, okay, this isn't one of those, we're going to get the interview and we'll say, we're going to talk about religion, but then we're going to talk about football. No, this is a story about religion. And typically, historically, It's been a channel changer. Soon as
Mhm.
people start hearing about religion, a lot of them just change the channel. And I said,
Mhm.
we can't do that. So if you want to tell this story the right way, you have to make a commitment to understanding it's going to be about religion. So
Mhm.
I've just always found that it's a very, very delicate balance, I think. And truthfully, Rabbi, there have only been a handful of athletes that I can tell you that I feel assured in my heart that their faith is as advertised. It
Mhm.
is what they say it is, because me personally, I really struggle with, God help me win this game. Really?
Yes.
Did he not help
Right.
the other team?
Mhm.
Is God really cheering here? So, I think that what you're doing is really tremendous, certainly in the synagogue and with the programs and promoting healthy living and the right values and associating sport with religion. But from a television broadcast perspective, I think it has always been a relationship fraught with a lot of angst.
It's actually interesting as I speak to people really in the broadcast industry. So like Jimmy Dykes from ESPN, he wrote a book right behind me called The Film Doesn't Lie. And it's all about how God watches us and also how in the sports world, the film doesn't lie, that the film tells exactly what's going to happen. Dan Schulman, he said, you know what, we have to separate this. But then as we dug deeper, he began sharing the story of the Gulf War, where he was at that moment. He was just a junior broadcaster in hockey in Ontario. And he left the broadcast because he said, there's a war in Israel. I need to go home. And on the screen said, due to events in the Middle East, this broadcast has ended. He said, could I have done that ESPN? Probably not. But at that moment, I had to decide who I was. Seth Greenberg, ESPN, he said, the locker room is my sanctuary. And each one of these people has brought a sense of, when we use the word faith loosely, they seem to tell me that, right, it's not about God made me hit the home run and God made the left fielder drop the fly ball, but there's a deeper sense right there. And so my question is, have you seen that both in the locker room, on the field? And I know, for instance, I talked to David Sampson a couple of weeks ago, and he talked about the Kennedy case right now, that the coach goes on the field and praise after the game, and that's going to the Supreme Court. So that's the broadcast booth. What about on the field within the teams? Where do you see faith aspects in a deeper way?
Well, look, take the sport of professional football,
Mm-hmm.
an inherently violent sport.
Mm.
Whatever it takes mentally for the player to prepare to get on the field, he or she, I guess, but primarily he, has to embrace that.
Mm-hmm.
And if his faith and however he manifests that faith, however he feels that faith is genuine to him, if that gives him confidence to be able to go out there and really, 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 really put his body and oftentimes his life at risk, because, you hear it, but it is, as someone who has been on the field literally for decades and
Mm-hmm.
has heard the sounds of the game,
Wow.
it's not always a pretty place.
Mm-hmm.
And everybody is really one hit away from, unfortunately, what could be disaster.
Mm-hmm.
So, and certainly a career-ending injury. So if that gives them strength, then I'm all for it.
Mm-hmm.
The athlete who I dealt with, whose faith was the most genuine and really out there, and it's actually the subject of the story that I mentioned to you earlier, is the late Hall of Famer Reggie White.
Mm.
And
I'm a pastor. Yep.
pastor, and was with the Philadelphia Eagles, won a
Yep.
Super Bowl with the Green Bay Packers. And I'll tell you a funny story. Packers win the NFC Championship game against Carolina Panthers in 1997. And I typically, so when I was with ESPN, I'd stay over, and if it worked with the team's schedule, I would do my pre-Super Bowl interviews the next few days. So Monday, day after the game, we're all set up to, do Brett Favre and to do Reggie, da da da. So Reggie walks in, and he was a truly physically larger than life presence, and he had that scratchy voice, which I could try to imitate, but I'm not going to do justice to it. But he walks in and he fills up the room and he goes, "They're going to have to listen to me now," meaning that he was about to have the biggest pulpit he's ever had,
Love it.
Super Bowl media, the
Mm-hmm.
world's media, and they were going to have to listen to him. And he
Mm-hmm.
was right. But he is someone whose faith was so strong. And we would talk about it. and I learned quite a bit from him. But his it was very, very genuine. Another person in the coaching ranks was Tony Dungy, who
Absolutely.
certainly sustained the most, tragic of losses with his
Lost his
eldest son
son.
committing suicide,
Mm-hmm.
James. And talk about needing faith to get you through that.
Mm-hmm.
He and Lauren needed that. But so I've seen it. I just and you see players that come together on the field after the game, all pray together in a circle.
Right.
Again, if that's what gives them strength, and that's fine. But the natural skeptic in me says I also know plenty of guys, truthfully, who say they're so devout and they're so faithful to God and faithful, and they ain't faithful other places. Let's just put it that way. Am I
Right.
trying to be diplomatic there? So again, I have seen my share of hypocrisy as well. But I've learned over the years not to judge. It's just that simple.
Well, I think.
And with personal stuff, unless it affects their performance,
Mm-hmm.
and hence I need to look into it,
Mm-hmm.
it's their personal business.
Well, I think the fact that you say do not judge is just an aspect of faith as well. I mean, that is what our High Holy Day message is all about. It's not the judgment of the other, but in fact, the judgment of the self. And when you speak about pulpit, right, the media within the sports, it is a pulpit. And these days, it's becoming the bigger pulpit. And we're just a couple of days after this just horrible tragedy in Texas where 19 children and 2 teachers are murdered senselessly. And just last night, Steve Kerr, coach of the Warriors, during the NBA playoffs, sports can be a distraction, but it also can be a pulpit. And he was quoted as saying, "When are we going to do something? I'm tired. I'm so tired of getting up here offering condolences to the devastated families out there. I'm tired of the moments of silence." What is the role of that sports pulpit when something like a national tragedy happens, or when an athlete or a coach or a broadcaster can bring moments of change to our society?
Did you see Steve Kerr? Did you actually see it? Did you watch it? Did you listen to it?
Yep.
Because if anybody hasn't, I would strongly advise you'll find it pretty quickly online,
Mm-hmm.
because to read the words does not do justice to the passion and the pain in his voice. And for some of your listeners, watchers who do not know, Steve Kerr's father, Malcolm, was assassinated.
Yep.
So Steve Kerr himself, his family obviously was a victim of gun violence. Look, Steve Kerr has the gravitas and the passion and the informed opinion to be able to do what he did. And I think that it's vital. When he even talked about what is that moment of silence doesn't mean anything, because we're just going to go and get on the court right after that. And everybody's going to forget, and calling out the 50 senators, and all you had to do was hear the pain and the strength in his voice. And if it forces every writer, broadcaster to put that message out there, then that in itself has power and strength, in my opinion. You can't avoid that. That was the story with Steve Kerr. He wasn't talking about, rebounding and how was the 3-point shooting or anything like that. And look, I think that we associate players using their platform in these past couple of years, particularly post George Floyd's murder, with social activism, with social justice. And it is hugely important for these athletes and coaches to be able to do that if that's what's important to them. And truthfully, I got to tell you, I'd rather see the players and coaches do it than the leagues try to do performative gestures that really don't mean anything, that look like they're just doing the politically correct thing. The players are the ones. Are the ones with the power. And I admire and I encourage them to use their voices as much as possible.
I think you're a genius at that, just watching years of what you do on the field, but also the investigative journalism, specifically with the Real Sports and HBO. And I just finished Jim Gray's book about talking to GOATs, and you've talked to GOATs, greatest of all times, from Brady to Kobe to Phelps to Jordan. And here's a quick interview with Kobe. And I just want to ask you about, last week I had Miss Val, the UCLA Hall of Fame gymnastics coach, and she talks about the art of the nudge and the courage to ask. And you definitely have the courage to ask. And this is when you sat down with Kobe. This is what you said to him.
Smile, because you know what's coming, right? Loner, selfish, single-minded, arrogant, aloof, relentless, obsessed, ruthless, and your own teammate, Steve Nash, when asked to describe you in 3 words, quote, mother effing asshole. Why are you laughing?
Because they're all true.
They are.
I think that's what we call chutzpah in the Jewish world. How do you have the ability to sit down with Kobe Bryant, perhaps one of the greatest of all times, and say to his face those things, but deeper, trying to bring out something for the audience to really understand of who he is? Well,
I think that, first of all, I think his reaction told you everything about who he is, and that he embraces that. In that Real Sports piece, and that was actually the only TV News Magazine story that he did the year that his final year playing. I had to ask him about the sexual assault allegations that occurred in Colorado. That was a little bit more fraught with. Look, I believe you can ask anything if it's asked respectfully and in the right way. If my tone had been, here's some words that were said about you, you're real this, you're this, it sounds accusatory. But I was trying to take sort of not a lighter tone, but I was quoting words that have been said about it, and then of course quoting his teammate. And I think that it was what we call good TV, but it also, the key is not just to make good TV. The key is to give the audience insight when we're doing profiles, insight into these players or coaches that they would not get otherwise. It's just that simple. But I think that you really can ask anything that you want if it is asked with the right tone and if it's asked fairly. I've been in a number of situations where you have to ask either questions that are fraught with tremendous emotion, or they may be seen as accusatory. And again, you can't back down. That's what journalism is all about. That's not, let me post something on social media because I don't have to have Andrea Kremer ask me a follow-up question.
Right.
And I think that I like to think, I hope that the audience is savvy enough to understand the difference between the two.
And so one of the other greatest of all times that you really followed was Michael Jordan. I basically grew up in that era as a child with his posters on the wall. And this is what you said to Rich Eisen about how you nailed that interview when he came back to the land of basketball.
That was the start. And then, I did all 6 of Jordan's championships, but I did everything. I did, the good, the bad, the ugly, the gambling in Atlantic City, the death of his father, following him on the road when he went and played baseball.
So after that, he comes back, and you were quoted as saying, Diane Sawyer couldn't nail him, but Andrea Kremer got that interview.
Well, it was actually a columnist for the San Francisco Chronicle who wrote it. Better than me saying it, that's for sure. I believe in undersell and over-deliver. That's one of my biggest mantras in life, believe me. And no, the writer for the San Francisco Chronicle wrote, Dan Rather, Diane Sawyer, Ed Bradley, all these people tried to get Michael Jordan, but Andrea Kremer got the interview because she had a longstanding relationship with him. That's the other thing. You got to be there through all the times.
To me, that's fake.
When he came back from Atlantic City in the middle of the playoffs, I was standing there with a microphone asking him questions. when he had to testify in the Slim Buller trial down in North Carolina, that I was down there. And again, you give someone an opportunity to answer the questions. As I always say, I have to ask, you don't have to answer. I mean, that's one thing. For example, on Real Sports, we don't pay for interviews, and we give no parameters for interviews. We have to be able to ask anything that we need to. Doesn't mean we're going to ask it. But again, I have to ask, you don't have to answer. But the minute you abdicate any kind of control over an interview in terms of, oh yeah, I won't ask that. You're opening Pandora's box that you cannot close. Because the minute you do that, you say, well, I don't have to, you said you won't ask me about that, so I don't want you to ask me about this. And you just can't do that. But listen, I am very, I was going to say blessed, but I guess when I'm talking to a rabbi, that's got a whole different connotation.
No,
right?
exactly.
I am very, I don't want to say lucky, because I feel that it wasn't luck. It was certainly timing. And I hope to think that it was some skill that I've covered, as I say, the two greatest Michaels in all of sports, Michael Jordan and Michael Phelps, at key moments in their careers. And I am extremely, extremely grateful for that.
So actually, I think sometimes blessing is lucky, blessing is fortunate, but also the tradition says that you're supposed to say 100 blessings a day. And people say, how can you do that? But if you open up your eyes, the blessings are there. Sometimes you actually just have to grab them with what you see and what you feel as well. So I think lucky and blessing within the faith world do go hand in hand. And some of those things that I would say are timing, skill, and fortune are what you have done in the world of broadcasting, but also really breaking the gender barrier. And one show that you had, We Need to Talk, brings 12 women together. And this is what you have to say about why a show like this was necessary.
You need an all-female show.
Well, it's historic. There's never been, I mean, you may have a woman that appears on another sports show, but never have you had all these women from these very different backgrounds bringing their opinions, their knowledge to a show like this.
But you know what, guys?
So what was We Need to Talk
Wait, it
about?
reminds me that my hair looked a lot better when I had somebody that did it professionally. I'm sorry.
No. It's okay. Some people are listening just on audio, so we're all good.
You know what? I got to tell you, that was an idea that germinated in me for a really, really long time. And I'm not alone in that, I think. But I think, the funny thing is, whether it was my dear friend Amy Trask, who I was sitting next to on that CBS This Morning set, or Leslie Visser or Pam Oliver, my longtime, decades-long pals, we're always talking sports. And we could be talking about Steve Kerr, or we could be talking about Steph Curry's shooting, whatever it is. We're talking X's and O's, whatever. And finally, we had a show where, in essence, we're just doing what we've always done behind the camera, and people just get a chance to see. So I think that this whole notion that you had to play the game, you need to, as though men are born with some gene that predisposes them to know or love sports, I think is ridiculous. I think that women can be passionate about anything that men are, and sports happens to be one of them. But ironically, I speak to a lot of corporations, and I'll speak to a main group, and then there's usually a breakout group with female executives. And I always tell them the water cooler really exists. On a Monday morning, after the Rams have played or the Chargers have played, you don't need to know what happened on 3rd and 10 from the 17 with 2 minutes to go, but you need to know who won the game. You need to know who had a good game. You need to know the headlines, because if not, you're not in that conversation at the water cooler. And it is part of the culture. And certainly it's part of a male-dominated culture. But I've done over the years a number of these, they're called NFL 101 seminars, teaching women about football. Even though at some point men came and said, you can't say it's just teaching women about football, because we want to come too.
Nice.
But I say it doesn't matter if you don't know a first down from a down comforter. We can give you enough information, because the more you understand, the more you're going to enjoy it. It's just that simple. Just like the more you know who the players are, football is a unique sport because they're helmeted.
Right, exactly.
You don't see their faces. You don't really see what they look like. Of course, everybody knows what Tom Brady looks like, but for the majority of players, you don't. If you know who they are, if you know something about them, you care more about them. If you care more about them, you care more to watch the game, and it just builds the audience. And again, it's not just for men. It's not just for women, but I think that men want to know more as well.
And so when you talk about the cooler, here I actually say it's by the Ark. So that's where we do our chats here, by the Ark and the Torah. But when you
you're talking about the game on Mondays by the Torah?
Absolutely. What do you think the rabbis are talking about between the sermons and the page announcements? It's who's playing. And I say that tongue in cheek, but also seriously, because Rabbi Solomon Schechter, he was the first conservative rabbi in America. He was quoted as saying that you cannot be a rabbi in this country of the United States of America without talking about baseball. Now, that was many, many years ago. And the idea that when you're speaking from a religious pulpit, you also have to know the place where you are in this country of America and what it stands for. What do you see that football stands for? It's basically the most watched sport in America. Sundays are a holiday. Sundays are football day. What does football represent in this country of America?
Wow, that is a deep question in the sense that it is very multifaceted for me, because from a competitive and sporting perspective, from an analytical standpoint, from a strategic standpoint, it's a fascinating sport. There's so many layers to understand. I feel very fortunate that over the years, I mean, really, I'm talking like decades, years, I've watched so much film and I've asked questions. And when you don't know something, I always tell young people, never BS your way through something. If you don't know, just ask. People always know if you really don't have the information. Watching film with coaches, but I love that. I love being able to do that. And so football has all of that. It's got the grace, it's got the grit, it's got an element of violence that people can live vicariously through. But let's not sugarcoat it. It's a violent game. And we know what it does to bodies, what it does to limbs, what it does to brains. And there is definitely a level of cognitive dissonance that people who cover the game need to really come to grips with, because it's the old how the sausage is made, and sometimes it's not so tasty to know that. So it's a complicated issue, but yeah, I love football. I've loved it since I was 8 years old, and I learned about it. And the thing that I had going for me, which I always say, and it's hugely important to me, is I had two parents that thought it was okay that cute little Andy liked football. And my parents supported me and bought me books and took me to games. And I convinced my dad to buy season tickets to the Philadelphia Eagles. And we did. And it really was a way that our family came together on Sundays. And it does bring people together, no doubt.
And so there are stories that happen off the field. The one story that I saw that you really reported on during COVID was a story of Laurent Duvernay-Tardif, who basically said, I'm not playing football. I'm going to help people and save their lives. Another Jewish value of pikuach nefesh, to save a life. Maybe take us through that story and how you earlier you said the stories come to you. Are there times, though, that you go find that story?
Oh, yeah, all the time.
The public needs to hear something that, like you said, we don't see on TV.
Oh, yeah, totally. I mean, the story that I mentioned with Reggie White that we haven't even talked about. But yes, with Laurent is a very unique person. He is a medical doctor. He has the only active player with a medical degree. And he got that degree while he was playing football. And which is really an amazing thing. He is very, very smart, but he's also very, very driven. And he won a Super Bowl. He is Canadian, so we went to school up at McGill. He's from Montreal, outside of Montreal. And at the onset, they win the Super Bowl, and he and his partner, they go on a trip, and they come back, and they're kind of hearing about this thing called COVID. They're not sure what it is. And really to encapsulate what happened, players were allowed to opt out of the season.
Right.
They could opt out for medical reasons, in which case they got their full salary, or they could opt out for other reasons, in which case they did not get a full salary. The team would toll their contract, which is basically put it ahead to the next season.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what Laurent chose to do, because he could not see being in a public health emergency and leaving the people at the hospital to do the work while he's off playing a game, although it's a very, very, very high paying game and it's his day job and all. And for him, he had not done his rotation yet. So there are only certain things he could do. And some of those things were the most mundane, and it could be drawing blood. It could be whatever. But what it was doing is it was freeing up doctors to do other things.
Mm-hmm.
And the other thing that Laurent did, which, talk about needing faith, is, as you know, when you were in the hospital, you're cut off from all family, and especially older people. And they're not they're not comfortable with iPads and devices and FaceTime. And Laurent would get their families on, and that would be sometimes the only time the entire day he would facilitate the communication. And it was heartbreaking for people that were really involved in that. He would leave the hospital. He's living with his girlfriend. He would leave the hospital. He had an apartment that he would go. There's nothing in the apartment, but basically like a couple of pillows on the floor and a washing machine. Walk in the apartment, disrobe, wash all the clothes. And then a lot of times he described having just he would like lay on the floor, and sometimes he would just cry because of what he experienced. And he needed to try to have closure for that for the day before he went home.
Mm-hmm.
And he didn't want to bring disease home physically, or he wanted to try to bring home as best as he could a clear mind. But it was really, to hear him talk about it, I have such admiration for this man making a decision like that, putting aside the money, putting aside, all the things. Football is a very short life. There were no guarantees that the Chiefs were going to take him back. And he did the right thing. And gosh, my admiration for him is just boundless.
So faith in another aspect is reaching the top. We talked about the We Need to Talk, but I want to talk about Thursday Night Football on Amazon, that the producer said, this show was made for you and Hannah Storm. If it wasn't you two, it wasn't going to be anybody. So here's what you said about speaking with Hannah about what it meant to get Thursday Night Football.
When we were growing up, we didn't exist.
Right.
There were no women to look at and say, oh, I want to do what she does.
It wasn't really a career option.
No, and for me, my path was a little bit different because I started off as a writer. And then from a writer, I went to be a producer. And then Steve Sable from NFL Films, who said, I want you to co-host the show with me. This is the NFL. I had no idea how to be on camera, but I was a pretty good producer. And I figured that the good producer I was could bail out the talent that I was not at that point. And that set me off on my trajectory.
So that trajectory from a writer to on camera to being the two only female duos in the studio on an NFL broadcast. What does that mean, not just to you, but to the future of my daughter, who's 10 years old, watching sports?
First of all, I want to give you kudos for finding all these clips. I have great admiration for anyone who does the level of preparation that you're doing. So
thank you.
I really kudos to you on that. So the night before our first game in 2018, first I got a call from John Madden. My phone rings. I'm like, Coach, how are you? Why did I know about this? Why didn't you tell me? Why didn't you call me? Da, 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 da. And he said, I don't know. I didn't want to bother you. John Madden and I used to work together for many years at ESPN and NBC. So he goes, how you feeling? And I go, I'm pretty scared, Coach. I'm pretty nervous. And he goes, don't feel like you have to cram for the test. You've been preparing for this your entire career.
Love it.
When John Madden says that, it's kind of like the oracle talking. So it kind of amped my anxiety level from 10 down to maybe a 6, but at least it was going down. So that's a good thing. So that was a very, very important call I got. And then I got an email from somebody, I have no idea who it is. I don't know how he got my email address, but it said in essence, good luck to you two women. Please know that on Friday morning, a generation of girls is going to wake up and know that an entirely new dream is possible.
Yeah.
And I forwarded this on to Hannah. We're both like crying, you know, because we are so busy with the preparation and this and that. It really hadn't kicked in the magnitude of what we were doing. And the great Billie Jean King always says pressure is a privilege. So I don't view pressure as anything but that. And I always say, the butterflies, the stress, it's okay if you channel it in the right way. If you let it propel you, it's great. If you let it paralyze you, not so good.
Right.
So the idea that we were really carrying this mantle, and the other thing that was hugely important to me is it wasn't one game, which is what you've seen in some other sports, and that's fine. I don't deal with what other networks do or anything like that. This has been a 4-year commitment from Amazon, and that's as with my entire career or Hannah's career in general, the idea of longevity is hugely important because that's consistency. And that's not being a one-shot wonder. So we were very, very, very cognizant of your 10-year-old daughter and this idea, because as I said in that interview that you showed, I go to talk to young people and I say, well, when I was your age, I didn't exist. And they kind of look at me quizzically. They don't really understand what I'm talking about, but I go, no. When I was your age, there was no sports center. Oh my God, life without sports center. How can that be? But then I say, there was no Andrea Kremer that I could look to and say, I want to do what she does, or a Hannah Storm or a Pam Oliver. And now we have to understand that is something, those are options that we give young people that we never had. And it is a great responsibility that I take very, very seriously. It's one of the reasons that I teach graduate school. When you get to a point in your career, look, everybody is insecure. Everybody in this silly, wacky business is insecure. But at some point, you have to make a determination. Am I going to be there to help someone that may replace me one day? Or how am I going to deal with that? And I've always said that. Believe me, it's difficult when you are trying to help someone that may take your spot one day, but it's a responsibility. It's important to do. I never had anybody that did that for me. And I want to make sure that I always do that for somebody else.
So you just spoke about dreams. It seems like we're pretty good teammates here because I'm going to cue up one more clip back to the HBO Real Sports with Kobe when he spoke about his daughter, Gianna, and having dreams. And this is what he said about dreams and his daughter.
It's important for kids to have those dreams and have those visions in a very detailed manner, particularly before they go to sleep, because then when they drift off, I think subconsciously those visions come back, and when they wake up, they're feeling energized or feeling inspired.
Comments on Kobe's dreams and the life of Gianna, sometimes dreams got her cut short.
Yeah, I mean, look, Kobe is the dad of 4 daughters. I think that changed him dramatically. Not just being a dad, but being a dad to girls. I think that the idea of, he called it dreams, you call it dreams, I call it passion. And maybe you don't have it when you're 10. It's interesting because my son's been passionate about something since he was a lot younger than 10, and he's going to be making a career out of it. I was passionate about sports since I was 8. Never in my wildest dreams, because I didn't exist, did I think I'd make a career out of it. My husband is an archaeologist. Right. He's been passionate about it since he's been a kid. He made a career out of it. If someone can be passionate about something, and it doesn't have to be at the age of 8 or 10 or whatever it is, they can find that thing that makes them want to get up every day and makes them want to go to their job, which doesn't feel like work, but hopefully compensates them enough so that they can live, that's pretty great. But I always say to young people, particularly a lot of women that will come to me and they want to be on the air. And oh, by the way, as not to digress, but the first thing I always say to them is, why do you want to be on the air? And if they go, oh, well, it looks really cool, you get to meet the athletes, you get to go to the locker room. No. You have no idea. Okay. Years back, I don't know if it's not the only game that's ever been canceled in the history of the NFL.
Well, the snow game. Yeah.
In Philadelphia, for Sunday Night Football, we had a game that was canceled. And on Sunday, they still had our pregame show, football.
You can see that picture right there.
And there I am on the field at Lincoln Financial Field, bundled up, basically showing people why there's no game tonight. And, this is not exactly the most glamorous assignment, but, and when you're on the sidelines and it is rain that is going sideways, you are chilled to every fiber of your being. And, we had a game one time when my producer goes, why don't you just go stand in the tunnel? We'll the heater for you. And I go, hey, this is the job. This is the job. And by the way, I do not miss that 1 second of my life. But anyway, there's no, as I tell the young people, it's not the glamour that you think it is. It's a lot of hard work. It's a lot of preparation. That being said, I am never in the business of quashing dreams. If someone wants to do something and they are intent upon doing it, I will always support them and try to help them in any way I can to guide them to a path to accomplish that dream. I tell people all the time, the easiest thing to do is to say no, because if you say no,
it's done.
You don't have to do anything.
Right.
If you say yes, there's got to be follow-up action. You got to do something else. And I always tell people, young people, regardless of what the industry is, don't just take no for an answer. Somebody tells you no, then what would you suggest? Is there something you didn't see in my resume or something in my interview? What feedback do you have for me about my performance? And then you say, is there anybody else that you might suggest that I talk to? Or is there somebody else that another network or another outlet you think I might run it? And then you always end with this. I know how busy you are. I'd like to stay on your radar. Are you okay if we stay in touch? And just don't let no have that note of finality.
Absolutely.
And so those are the things that I try to encourage young people, especially at this time. We're still, getting through COVID and all that, and jobs and cutbacks and things of that nature. And it's a very dicey situation for so many people. They're not even just all young. But you have to keep at it, and just don't let no be that end point.
Well, you said I thought you were going to say you got to have faith, because so much of what you said are those elements of faith.
I set you up to say that. You can say it sounds better coming out of your mouth than it does mine. What can I tell you?
No, but like you said, Kobe says dreams, you say passion, and I say faith. And it's the same elements to get there, right? Absolutely. Again, when somebody says pray for my loved one, well, what if it doesn't work? Does that mean that I did a bad job? And I think the same thing in your profession, in sports and broadcasting, right? The faith is, in fact, the work. I say if somebody comes here on Yom Kippur and they don't hit a home run, they don't feel anything, it's often because they didn't have batting practice. They didn't run their, 100-yard dash before they tried to, have a 50-yard run in the game. So let's then finally go back to the beginning and hear that Reggie White story about religion and why that mattered so much and why you put that on the air.
Okay. And by the way, I'm going to give you another compliment here. All right. So not only are you doing your preparation, but you are exhibiting one of the great qualities that is overlooked in interviewing, and that is you're a good listener.
Thank you.
And I assume that in your day job, you have to do a lot of that. So I'm not surprised about that. But anyway.
And you can tell my wife that as well, too, right?
You've got me on tape now.
Okay, there we go.
We'll edit it out and put it on a loop and give it to her. There you go. In a nutshell, I am in I used to live in LA, not far
Mhm.
from your synagogue. And I'm out and about one day, my phone rings and it's Reggie White. Reggie had been retired. And I always chafe at, when journalists say, oh yeah, I'm friends with. No, 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 no. You may be friendly with someone. That's different than being friends.
Mhm.
You shouldn't be friends with people that you cover. That's a very fine line. But anyway, that being said, Reggie retired and we were friends. And he calls me up and he's a man who was sort of at a crossroads. He was had his hand in a bunch of different things. He at some point had actually thought about trying to do a religious theme amusement park. I mean, he just had a lot of different ideas. And he says to me, I really want to talk with you about kind of where I am in my religious journey. And he starts telling me some things, and I found it really, really super interesting. At that point, I go to my producer and I say, Reggie's calling me and he's kind of offering this up, and I think it could be really, really interesting. Should we pursue it? Yes, pursue it. We have another conversation, and we set up a time. This is in late November. We set up a time right at the beginning of the new year for me to go to North Carolina, spend some time with Reggie, see what he's doing in his religious journey, which at that point he was studying Hebrew. So it was a really, really, really going to be a very fascinating story. My phone rings the morning of December 26th. Reggie White died. And when the phone rings that early and you're on the West Coast, it's never good.
Right.
And I went right on the air, audio wise, talking about it. It was beyond shocking. It was something that was very, to this day, even for me personally to talk about it, just tragic. He had sleep apnea, amongst other things. His beloved wife, Sarah, tried to revive him and he couldn't. So at the funeral, all this. Beginning of January, I get a call from the team chaplain for one of the teams who was very close with Reggie. And he says, you still have to do this story on Reggie. And I go, I'm not being trite by saying this, but it's really hard to do a story on someone when the person is dead. And he goes, no, you don't understand. He picked you. He chose you. This is like a sign. You have to do the story. Go to my producer. We talk about it. So we do the story. And what it was a journey through the eyes of his wife and his two children, this religious journey that he went on where he had stopped going to church and he wanted to learn about the Bible by reading it in its original language. And he had a rabbi who was in Israel that he was learning Hebrew from. He actually went to Israel. I guess there's a place where only a few select people can ever go to see the original Torahs. He was able to go in there.
That's right.
He was accused, to use his words, of becoming a Jew that he left his faith behind when what he was doing, in essence, was trying to get a deeper connection to God by learning the language and learning more about Hebrew. And I probably am not doing a great justice to the story, but it was so powerful. It was so amazing. And an interview had been done with Reggie talking about some of this stuff with NFL Films about 2 months prior to that. But they didn't really interview Reggie, but they had him practicing Hebrew. And it was like coming back from the dead. It was just unbelievable. But to ESPN's credit, they let me tell the story. It was completely about religion. It aired on Super Bowl Sunday.
Oh, wow.
And it was an amazing story of faith, what it really means to educate yourself and what it means to have belief. And to this day, it's one of the more impactful stories that I've ever brought to an audience. And that's what that's what I love to do, is to try to really bring something to the audience that they didn't know about and that could make them feel something. And that story with Reggie White really, really did it for me. And to this day, is very important to me.
You heard it here, everybody. Rabbi on the Sidelines, faith and football. It exists, and we are so grateful to have Andrea Kremer, Hall of Fame journalist, Emmy Award winning, literally the GOAT, one of the greatest of all time in the broadcasting industry, and now a friend of our community of Rabbi on the Sidelines. Andrea, thanks so much for being a guest, and we look forward to seeing you when you're out in LA.
Thank you so much. And again, I really commend you for all the work that you do in the community, in the synagogue, and then even in this passion project of yours, Rabbi on the Sideline, the preparation that you use, great questions, easy conversation, and it's really a pleasure. And to you, all your listeners, stay healthy.
Thank you.
Keep the faith. There you go. Have your passion, keep your faith, have your dreams, whatever you want to call it. But thank you so much. And when you see my dear friend Pam Weisberg, if you can give her a hug, even if it's a virtual hug, it would be greatly appreciated. So thank you so very, very much for thinking about me and having me on.
Thank you so much. Have a great week.